and welcome to a special episode of the Construction Record Podcast, brought to you by Naturally Wood, British Columbia's information center about sustainable forestry, tree species, green building, and design. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Ray Wolfe, an architect and partner at ThinkSpace Architecture Planning and Interior Design, and a contributing author of Design Options for 3- and 4-Story Wood School Buildings in British Columbia, which is a report prepared by ThinkSpace and Fastinep for the Canadian Wood Council and Woodworks BC. The report looks into the need for taller wood-based institutional buildings like schools, particularly in cities like Vancouver, where real estate is at a premium. In our interview, Wolfe also goes into the other benefits of wood construction, both for schools and other buildings, and the progress being made as wood becomes a more prevalent choice for construction of many different types of structures. Thanks for listening to the Construction Record. Here's Ray Wolfe.
Hello, everybody. Warren Fry, digital media editor for the Journal of Commerce, and I'm here with...
My name is Ray Wolfe. I'm a partner and architect here at ThinkSpace Architecture here in British Columbia.
And we're doing this interview because you wrote a report on sort of multiple level wood-based school buildings. But before that, I'd like you to give me a background as to why these are necessary in the Vancouver area, because you go into that in the report about how conditions here sort of require us to build in a smaller space.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of reasons, and I've written a number of reports or been involved in, different knowledge share aspects as it relates to wood in schools. And, as we see sites in the urban areas getting smaller and tighter, we're having to go vertical. And, we're building, for example, Surrey's first 3-story elementary school here right now that'll be coming out to the market fairly shortly. We're in construction documents. And, the idea of using products and materials that are local just makes a lot of sense. Reduces transportation. It helps with carbon sequestering. It helps with trying to, look at targets such as net zero carbon and net zero operating and energy. So there's just a whole bunch of good reasons why, clients are coming to us with goals around healthy buildings and projects that allow vertical, them to be vertical, but also create, beautiful buildings for the same kind of construction points that we have been building in the past.
Mm-hmm. And with schools, are there any, I assume there are, special considerations with schools that you wouldn't have with, say, other institutional buildings? And then how does wood translate into that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting what we've learned in our last report that we did for Woodworks BC. We were working with a co-consultant. There's been a bunch of research in around how to deal with assembly occupancy buildings and doing them in mass timber. And then there's a bunch of research that you can check out. The building code doesn't really address using combustible material in an assembly occupancy of a certain size. And that's where we've been talking to authorities having jurisdiction. And, we've got a number of projects, both in post-secondary and K-12, that are doing assembly occupancy buildings using combustible materials such as mass timber as the main structural framing system. And so it takes a lot of kind of knowledge sharing and discussions with the fire departments within those authorities having jurisdiction, with the planners and the inspectors to walk them through why we're meeting the performance criteria of the building code, even though the building code doesn't have a prescriptive nature for the kind of mass timber buildings that we're building. And I think you're going to see the building code change. I think it's going to adopt it as there's more in the market and authorities become more familiar with how to build in mass timber within the assembly occupancy realm. And
I mean, we're all familiar with the traditional quote unquote school, which is all cement and sort of semi-cold looking, and wood is not that. And did you get any pushback, or was there any sort of institutional resistance, or was it just everybody was really enthused about using new building products as opposed to what had been gone with before?
Well, it's a really fine balance because budgets are limited, they're fixed, and we want to create the best buildings we can for the budgets that we're given. And for K-12, the budgets are set unit rates that come from our Ministry of Education, and for post-secondary, those budgets are fixed as well. And often it's our clients who are wanting and need to meet those budgets, but they also want to create healthy environments for students, be it faculty, whether it be a research facility or school business, or whether it be a K-12 environment. We get our project managers, we get our actual clients who say, is there another way we can do this that makes sense with our budgets? And so those goals are on the table. to look at options such as mass timber. And, we don't come to our clients and say, we think you should only look at mass timber. We start every project by looking at what are the best and most likely construction typologies that make sense for the kind of building we're doing. And, it was interesting because the Woodworks BC report that looked at the four-story mass timber school, that is certainly pushing the envelope, but we're doing a three-story right now, which is actually a real project. And so, there is a desire for the aesthetic, certainly, as you mentioned, to create something that you can see the wood, you can feel the warmth of it. And that is certainly one aspect as to why, clients come to us and say, can we explore that as well as looking at concrete, for example? And in schematic design, we work really, really hard to examine the structural options. And if mass timber is equal in price, it is a really likely candidate to move forward in design development using a mass timber or a hybrid mass timber system. So it's on the table early, and it needs buy-in from our QSs, because our QSs at the end of the day are helping us with our budgets to say yes, that's a good approach. It makes sense with your budgets.
And in the report, I noticed there's some, I think, you're more familiar than I am with cutting edge stuff in there. So maybe you could go into some of the different techniques that are being proposed and used with wood in school environments.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things coming at us from Europe. 10 years ago, as architects, we'd fetishize over the connection detail, trying to make a nice pin connection. But now it seems like almost every mass timber building is easily and able to have stainless steel pin connections and nice detailing. It seems very commonplace now. But what we're finding, and this is maybe outside of the report, when it comes to the reality of what we're actually building as of today, that report's was done a few months ago. Now, we're finding that the hybrid approach makes the most sense. So not just starting with saying, well, it's going to be all CLT and it's going to be all mass timber. No, actually, what we're finding works for our budgets is a mass timber frame. So that's glulam, post and beam. And we're using a lot of metal deck with concrete topping on top of that. So it's getting us much closer to a more wood building. But there's nothing that says that you should be building all wood. You really have to pick the materials that work for acoustics, that work for your budget, work for all the other things you're trying to achieve. And certainly we're strong proponents as architects, here at ThinkSpace to really pursue wood and make sure it's on the table. It's something that we believe is important to look at from the client's benefit as well as doing the right thing for the environment. But it's not something we say thou shall do. It's something that we always put as an option, and we're finding more and more that it is the option of choice, which is really exciting for us because of the kinds of spaces that you're able to create when you're using these exposed structural elements.
And what are some of those spaces? Because that's in the report as well. There's some interesting sort of auditoriums and sort of labs and stuff in ways that you wouldn't see them before.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can imagine sort of any space in an institutional building. You think cold environments, you think T-bar ceilings everywhere. Well, once you start, investing the time and energy into mass timber, you're wanting to coordinate your building systems very carefully, because what we try to do and what we are doing is we like to expose as much of the structure as possible. So it starts to really think of the building as a system. Mentors that I've worked with in the past and really good architects have always told me, and something I believe in really firmly and strongly, is that buildings are homes for people, and they're homes for systems and for services and the things that need to make the building work. So you need to consider both the people and the systems that make up the building to make it functional. This idea of trying to do less in the ceilings, trying to do less in the finishes, so you can expose as much of the nice warm wood products. That's where you're getting into spaces like the project spaces in K-12. Where we don't just have double corridors or classrooms anymore. We create these pods, and we create these learning environments where you have a maximum of 150 students in a K-12 environment. That's kind of the magic number. You don't want to exceed that. We've sort of learned from experience. But classrooms of 4 or 5 want to be clustered around something, some kind of node, some kind of really special space that allows teachers to connect, allows students from different groups to connect, and something that actually supports our curriculum in the province of British Columbia, because it is about tactile learning, it is about experiential learning, it is about all those other ways of learning that aren't just the traditional academic modalities. And so the spaces that we design really need to help reinforce and give opportunity and options for teachers in the K-12 that want to teach in that kind of way and that new way of teaching. So the mass timber kind of goes hand in hand with the ethos, if you will, of some of the pedagogy that for our clients, and we're just kind of tying in the architecture that marries with that pedagogy and supports it. And by doing that, you're creating buildings that are didactic. You're creating buildings that suddenly you see what they're made of. You don't just see T-bar everywhere. You see the exposed wood glue lambs in the ceiling and the roof and the columns exposed, and the students and faculty can feel and touch the structure, and it's warm, it's not cold.
I think we're past the experimental stage with wood. I made them. That was maybe, let's say, 10 years ago. You know better than I would, but we aren't quite at the everybody just accepts it as a thing stage yet either. So how does the school help with that, sort of pushing it forward as a form? And also, where do you think we are, and when do you think it's going to be just kind of an accepted thing that we just do wood and that's what we do?
Yeah.
If it isn't already.
I don't know if it'll ever just be that we just do wood and that's all we do. I think it'll always be. I think maybe the other way to ask the question is, when will wood be a norm and we don't have to question it and go
that's
to such
a person to.
I think they're early adopters, and I think we're over that kind of you look at the curve of something that takes momentum in a culture, in a business, or in an economy. And I think we're past the peak, and now it's kind of just the easy moves of all the momentum that's been created over the last decade or even longer, really, to be honest, because we've been building in wood for over 100 years. I mean, there's mass timber buildings in downtown Vancouver that are sort of this. We're kind of building like that again, so it's a resurgence. But I think when it will become not as much effort with the authorities having jurisdiction as when the building code changes. I think that's when it'll really just be a norm, and people won't have to invest the time to understand, well, why is it safe and why is it okay to have a combustible building? Because right now we're doing it with a lot of education, with a lot of effort to help people understand that it is acceptable, that it is a good way to do it. It is safe. It does meet the intention of the building code, but the building code doesn't have a prescriptive approach to it yet. And that's coming. I think the next iteration of the British Columbia Building Code, I think, will address that, and will be in much better shape, because there's so many manufacturers out there. There's new, there's so many different companies that are manufacturing products, and it's becoming more and more available. Although you constantly hear some projects, people who don't build with wood but think they jump on the bandwagon and they're maybe interested in still steel ultimately, or they're interested in concrete, or trying to reduce risk, let's say. The old adage that, the market's flooded and it's not available. And well, prices go up and down with all materials. So you need to just measure where your material unit rates are going to be and your escalation unit rates are going to be at the start of your project, and that'll help you determine if wood's a good option for you or not. So I think we need to start thinking of it like any other material, as opposed to something so special. And once we think of it as an equal or alternate to all the other kinds of materials we build, and it's just one of the palettes, then I think that's when we're truly over the hump, and that's when it will be always an option, as opposed to trying to put it on the table and the client maybe not being too interested because of risks or just not knowing.
Okay, Ray, thanks very much.